Andy Ruiz and Jarrell Miller battle to a 12-round majority draw in quite a fun, entertaining fight. I had a good time watching this one. I didn't watch it live. I watched it this morning. That's when I caught up with all the boxing from last night. And yeah, if you haven't seen this fight, it gets a recommendation from me. I had a good time watching this one. It was very entertaining. A battle of the fat boys. And yeah, I was able to find a really good copy of this one, so I was pleased. There were no rounds missing. There was no funky editing or angles or anything like that. So I enjoyed this one. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I didn't do a formal prediction video for this one. I just didn't get around to it. So instead I addressed it in the live stream I did on Friday. And anyone who tuned into that will know I was picking Jarrell Miller to beat Andy Ruiz. I thought he'd beat him on points. And my rationale behind that was, even though I see Andy Ruiz as the more proven and the more talented fighter, I didn't like the inactivity. Andy Ruiz has been out of the ring for nearly 2 years by this point, before last night. Whereas Jarrell Miller, he's been fighting a lot more frequently. And even though he was coming off a loss and a stoppage loss to Daniel Dubois, I don't think that was the hardest loss to get over. It wasn't like he got completely starched and he was going to come back 8 months later and we weren't going to be sure what kind of neurological condition he was going to be in, whether his punch resistance would have taken a hit or anything, pardon the pun. But I had just had a bit more confidence in Jarrell Miller, his current condition, because I think that fight against Dubois was more of a wake-up call more than anything for him to kind of take his conditioning a bit more seriously and take this fight against Ruiz a bit more seriously. And so I thought he'd be able to outwork Ruiz in this fight to a points decision. And that's exactly what I saw personally. I think that Miller was a clear winner in this fight. And I gave Ruiz rounds. I gave him the first 2 rounds. I gave him the 11th, and the other round I gave him was the 4th. So I gave him 3 of the early rounds and 1 of the later rounds. I think I actually had the 12th round even too. I found them quite difficult to split in that one. So if someone's going to give it one way or the other, I'm not going to hold it against them. But me personally, I couldn't split them for the 12th. But other than those rounds, I think Miller clearly won the others, particularly the 5th, I think it was. I think that was a big round for Miller going off of memory. Yeah, because he was able to string together a lot of offense. But for the most part, the actual pattern of the fight was Miller, as you would expect, trying to come forward on Ruiz and, apply that pressure, use volume punching. And I remember a lot of people in the Element group, and I think Hatman himself as well, said that Ruiz can't afford to give up too much ground against Miller, because Miller getting that forward momentum, that's the kind of fight he wants, and he's going to be able to get that momentum, get his activity going, and outwork fighters like Ruiz and potentially dog him out of the fight. And I think in large spots that's what we saw in this fight, where Ruiz has this talent and he has this cutting edge speed, so it looks really eye-catchy and flashy when he lets his hands go. It makes a big boom when he lands, especially on a target as big as Miller. But he's throwing single shots, maybe a couple of 2-punch combinations. But then you have Miller landing a hell of a lot of body shots that are accurate. He's shoe-shining Andy Ruiz at points, landing flush punches to the head. And yeah, they're probably not as, or almost certainly not as hard as Ruiz's punches, but they're just as accurate. They're just as valid scoring punches, and there are more of them. And it's like, are you going to bias Ruiz's low volume punches because he's likely a harder puncher, or are you going to go for the guy who's landing more clean punches in a round over longer stretches of the round that are just as accurate, but maybe they're not as hard, they're not as eye-catchy? And so for that reason, I think Jarrell Miller did win this fight. I think he won the majority of the rounds and won them quite clearly. And I didn't know the result of this fight when I was watching. I was able to just find a copy, hit play, and let it unfold, and obviously watch it completely blind without knowing the result. And it got to the 4th and the 5th round, and I was thinking, damn, is Ruiz going to get stopped? Because he looked completely gassed. He just looked out of it. He was getting hit a lot. He was getting pushed back a lot. He was getting out-muscled in the clinches. Jarrell Miller was almost turning it into a sumo wrestling match at points. And obviously, these two guys have the very appropriate physiques for sumo wrestling. Excuse me. And I was thinking, yeah, damn, is Ruiz going to get stopped? But he showed remarkable heart in that regard. Although, when it came to his heart and his kind of fighting spirit, there were moments where Ruiz, he looked a bit dejected. He was still trying, but you could see he didn't really have the eye of the tiger. And there were moments where he was looking away, where he was, his gaze just seemed to be outside of the ring. It's like, is Jarrell Miller able to dog him out in this fight? But no, he stayed the course, did Ruiz, and he stuck in there. And I think this really just was him not having the fitness, not having the conditioning, not just of his body but of his mind, the ability to fight for longer stretches of the rounds. He had these flashes, these bursts where he'd let his hands go, and it's very impressive. Even now, after watching Andy Ruiz for years, it still impresses me to see a man of his size let punches go that fast, that explosive, and that sharp. But there just wasn't enough of it. It was good, it was high quality, and it was often quite accurate, but there just wasn't enough for my money. So, yeah, I think Jarrell Miller was able to implement his type of fight over the majority of the rounds, and I think this is actually a bit of a poor performance by Ruiz, largely down to the fact that he hasn't been active, and because he hasn't been able to fight, he probably hasn't been training all that much. And so let this be a cautionary tale of, no matter how talented you are, because Andy Ruiz is talented. This guy is no bum. He's been boxing for a long time. He knows his way around the ring. He's got a lot of natural talent, even though the fact, like, despite the fact he's grossly overweight. He's a very dangerous operator on his day, and even he can't escape the detrimental effects of inactivity and being out of the ring too long and lacking discipline. I think that's really what it comes down to. So, yeah, I believe that this draw, this decision, it's not the worst decision I've ever seen, but I definitely disagree with it. I think that this was a Jarrell Miller victory. However, I'm going to suspend my sympathy, and I imagine most people who also think that Jarrell Miller won, I think they're going to do the same, because Jarrell Miller has a history of being a repeated cheat, a repeat offender. So I know some people don't believe in karma. Other people believe in different forms of karma. They don't go with the kind of traditional or the common definition of it being what goes around comes around. But I think this is exactly that. Miller was dishonest and cheated so often for so long that when something probably was supposed to go his way, he's not going to get the benefit of the doubt, and he's not going to get sympathy from many people. I don't have any sympathy for him, even though I do think that he won this fight. So, you know, let that be a lesson to anyone who's doing anything untoward. Sometimes you might have a day where it's supposed to be you, but because of what you've done in the past, maybe you don't get it. So, hey, just my opinion. But yeah, I thought Miller won this fight. I thought he was able to fight the kind of fight he needed. Andy Ruiz, too inactive, flashes of impressive bursts, but not enough for him to win a 12-round decision. But hey, that's what we get, is a draw between these two. Maybe there's a rematch, or maybe they go separate ways. We shall see, but a very fun fight, I thought. An entertaining watch over the course of 12 rounds, so check it out if you haven't. Other than that, if you have watched the fight, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section below. Do you think the right decision was called, or did you think, like me, Jarrell Miller was hard done by? Or maybe you thought Andy Ruiz won. I can't imagine there are going to be many people thinking that, but hey, there are plenty of opinions in boxing these days. So leave yours down below, and I'll get back to you. For now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.